I returned from the hospital just before midnight, exhausted and still holding my discharge papers. The house was dark except for one light in the kitchen. My son Daniel was sitting at the table, shaking so badly his coffee cup rattled. "Dad, you can't go upstairs," he whispered. I asked why. His eyes filled with tears. Then he said, "Please, just trust me." But something inside me told me not to. I walked upstairs anyway. When I opened our bedroom door, I froze. Sitting on the bed was my late wife Susan's old black suitcase. It had been locked since the day she died. My name is Robert, and Susan was the love of my life for 42 years. She died 8 months ago, and I still wasn't used to waking up without her voice. That suitcase was one of the few things I couldn't touch. Before she passed, Susan told me once, "Robert, if you ever find this suitcase open, don't trust the first person who explains it." I never understood what she meant. Now the suitcase was sitting in front of me. Daniel appeared behind me. His face had gone pale. I asked him where he found it. He wouldn't answer. Then I noticed something strange. There was a fresh scratch around the lock. Someone had forced it open. I turned toward my son and asked, "What did you do?" He started crying. "Dad, I swear I didn't know what was inside." That sentence frightened me more than anything else. Because if Daniel hadn't opened it, someone else had. And whoever did it had left one thing sitting on top of Susan's clothes. A sealed envelope with my name on it. I picked up the envelope, but before I could open it, Daniel grabbed my wrist. "Dad, wait." His voice was trembling. I pulled my hand away and asked him why he was so afraid of a letter from his own mother. He looked toward the hallway and whispered, "Because Mom told me never to let you read it." My heart sank. Susan had always been honest with me. At least I thought she had. I stared at Daniel and asked what she had told him. He shook his head. "I promised her." That answer made me even more suspicious. I took the envelope downstairs and sat at the kitchen table. Daniel followed me but stayed several feet away. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Robert, if you are reading this, something has happened that I prayed never would. I need you to listen carefully before you trust anyone, even our own children." I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. Susan continued by saying she had discovered someone had been accessing our financial accounts without permission. At first, she thought it was a bank mistake. Then she found several withdrawals made while we were both home. The amounts were small, but they happened repeatedly. She had started keeping copies of every bank statement in the suitcase. Then I found another envelope underneath her letter. This one contained printed bank records. My name was on the account, so was Daniel's. I looked at my son. He immediately started crying. "Dad, I can explain." I asked him if he had taken money. He said yes. But then he told me something I never expected. He hadn't taken it for himself. He had been sending it to someone else. I asked who. Daniel looked toward the stairs. Then he whispered, "Mom knew who it was." My heart began pounding. I asked him why Susan had never told me. Daniel said, "Because she was afraid you'd do something you couldn't take back." I stared at him. Then suddenly we heard a noise upstairs. A floorboard creaked. Daniel stopped breathing. I stood up. "Who's in my house?" He didn't answer. I grabbed my phone and started walking toward the stairs. Then someone upstairs slammed the bedroom door. Daniel whispered, "Dad, that's why I didn't want you to go up there." I reached the top step. The suitcase was still on the bed, but the bedroom window was open, and someone had left muddy footprints across the floor. I stood at the bedroom doorway, staring at the muddy footprints. They led from the window straight to Susan's suitcase, then stopped beside the bed. Whoever had been there knew exactly what they wanted. I called the police, but before they arrived, Daniel finally told me the truth. He said that after Susan died, he discovered she had been investigating someone close to our family. She believed that person had been stealing from us for years. I asked why he never told me. Daniel lowered his head. "Because Mom made me promise. She said you were already grieving and the truth could destroy you." Then he pointed at the suitcase. "She found proof." I opened the second envelope. Inside was a photograph of a man standing outside our house. I recognized him immediately. It was my wife's younger brother, Michael. I hadn't spoken to him in years. Beneath the photograph was a bank statement showing thousands of dollars transferred to an account in his name. My heart sank. But there was one more document. It was a letter from Susan to her lawyer. She wrote that Michael wasn't working alone. I looked at Daniel. "Who else?" He started crying again. "Dad, I think it's me." I froze. Daniel explained that Michael had convinced him to give access to our accounts. He promised he would invest the money and return it with profit. Daniel had believed him. By the time he realized Michael was stealing everything, it was too late. Then Daniel said the worst part. "Mom found out before she died." I felt the room spinning. Susan had known. She had protected me. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was the police. They had found someone outside the house. Michael. But when the officers brought him inside, he wasn't carrying money or documents. He was carrying another envelope. He looked directly at me and said, "Robert, your wife left this for you. She told me to give it to you only after you learned the truth." My hands went cold. I opened it. There were only 4 words inside. "Your son isn't the thief." I read those 4 words again and again. "Your son isn't the thief." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked at Daniel, then at Michael. My mind was racing. If Daniel wasn't the thief, then who had been taking our money? Michael finally admitted everything. He had stolen some of the money, but he wasn't the person Susan had been investigating. He said someone had used Daniel's account to hide the real transactions. Susan had discovered it weeks before she died. Then Michael handed me one final document. It was a copy of our home's original financial records. One name appeared again and again. My own daughter, Emily. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Emily had been secretly transferring money from an account Susan created for our family. She had convinced Daniel to give her access by telling him she needed help paying medical bills. Daniel had never known the full truth. Susan had discovered everything and confronted Emily. That was when she began keeping evidence in the suitcase. I finally understood why Susan had told me not to trust the first person who explained everything. She knew I would want to believe Daniel was responsible, but she also knew he had been manipulated. The police took the documents and began an investigation. Emily eventually confessed. She admitted she had taken the money because she was drowning in debt and was terrified of losing everything. She said she believed Susan would forgive her. Susan hadn't, but she also hadn't stopped loving her. That was the hardest part for me to understand. Months later, I found Susan's final letter hidden beneath the lining of the suitcase. She wrote, "Robert, don't let betrayal turn you into someone you aren't. Protect yourself, but don't stop loving your children. Sometimes people make terrible choices because they're lost. That doesn't mean you have to let them hurt you again." I cried harder than I had since the day she died. Daniel eventually repaid what he could and spent months rebuilding my trust. Emily did the same. I didn't forget what happened. I simply learned that forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. I still keep Susan's suitcase in my bedroom, but now it doesn't frighten me. It reminds me that even when she was gone, my wife was still protecting our family. If you've ever discovered a painful family secret, tell me in the comments. Would you forgive someone who betrayed your trust if they truly changed? And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. And the greatest lesson Susan left me was simple. Love your family, but never ignore the truth just because the truth is painful.